We've been going through the Venerable's book, Working with Anger, and last week we were on the chapter about love and compassion. Actually, we used 2 weeks to talk about love and compassion. And last week we talked about our circle of compassion in our lives and is there anybody, when we think about compassion, we think about opening up to the world, who do we keep out of our circle and why? The issue of trust and how much others trust that. Let me start over. The issue of trust and how much trust others can bear in our lives came up with an exchange after that discussion. Trust is defined, so I went on to the dictionary to see what the general definition of it is a firm belief in the reliability, the truth, or ability of someone to serve or meet a need. When that level of trust changes, how do we make peace with that new reality? Levels of trust in our relationships. So I started to think about this in a bigger context as we generally build these levels of trust in our relationship based on personal experience, maybe some familiarity, confidence, longevity. Maybe there's very similar shared values, beliefs, worldviews. And what happened last week was one of our friends, I'll call her Betty, has had a friend now for 40 years. And this friend, in the past few years, their political views and ideals have changed so much that once what used to be a very connecting piece with enlivened conversation now has become a source of unsettling thoughts and disagreements for Betty. They still enjoy gardening. There's some other few little things that they have that connect them still, but this is one of the pieces that really sort of had the relationship, the friendship thrive. And now that there's quite a divergence in world and political views, the connection that kept them in trust and friendship has changed. Also, what has sort of changed this for Betty is that this friend is now passing a lot of judgment on Betty due to their very different views. And at this point, Betty's starting to wonder, why am I keeping this friendship? For Betty, there was a lot of frustration as she talked about it last week, and then when we sort of worked it a little bit and she'd shared some more, underneath it was a lot of grief and some sadness. The relationship did not turn out as she had hoped it would, 40 years is a long time, but she really had some assumptions that this relationship would go on for a very long time, and felt that the connection that really mattered and connected her to her friend was breaking down. The level of trust for her friend, she decided needed to be revisited, and her question is a good one. What is she holding on to? First of all, someone that she thought would never change has changed quite a bit, not just subtly moment by moment, but that person on some level doesn't even exist anymore. Impermanence is playing itself out right in front of her eyes. And at what point does she either adjust her level of trust to meet her friend where she is, or does she slowly let the friendship go because at this moment, where she is with that friend is causing her pain so much that she can't put that friend in her circle of compassion? So this has just been coming up this week to ponder this in my meditation practice. So the way I keep thinking about this is the changing nature of these levels of trust, especially the kind we have with certain people in our lives. There's a truth about them, there's a reliability, there's a steadfastness about them, even as they change. We can count on them, depend on them, trustworthy, they fulfill many needs. And what I began to understand, or at least from my side understand, is that much of the hurt that we have in our relationships through life is not so much that anyone has betrayed it, but that the relationship, the people, what we valued or based that trust on has shifted. And for Betty, she experienced a shift in a very, very core belief or view that she had shared with her friend that now are not ones that she can navigate without giving up something important to her. And, for her, having very strong worldviews and comparable political and environmental views are really important for her. And right now she can't navigate it to adjust that at a level of comfort that she can live with. And the judgment of her friend doesn't help the situation. So her need for connectedness, shared views, understanding, shared reality. I mean, where we meet with trust in our relationships is a lot of things. I mean, there's a lot of levels. It could be anything that we have that level of trust with our friends. And some of her fundamental ones weren't getting met. So then I thought a little bit farther along and saying, well, what kind of big life changes sometimes shift these levels of trust that we have with those very close in our life? Sometimes it's, close friends marry, someone has a child. As years go on, there's a loss of interest in shared common experiences and things that we delight in. A friend gets, we get ordained. That can shift, relationships. Important needs aren't getting met, so what do? We look elsewhere, and I'm thinking about, well, what about looking inside as well? We might need to revisit that. Because if we're not careful to be able to hold and accept these different levels of trust in these relationships in our life, they can turn into nostalgia, this wistful or sentimental yearning for a return to or some sort of past period or irrecoverable relationship in our life that simply isn't there anymore. And it could lead us to some bitterness, to some melancholy. You get a little bit nostalgia about these relationships that are dynamic because we're all changing, we're all dynamic. But what I finally came to realize is what's important is that this kind of level of trust, when it changes, it's not wrong, it's not bad. There's no deception, there's no betrayal, there's no lies. We just matter differently to each other. And the closer we are, the harder it is to accept the fact that we matter differently to each other. So my conclusion right now is, in the end, our Dharma practice will help us to reassess these changing levels of trust. And as our refuge in the three jewels grows, our practice, our training deepens. At least I've experienced this on a number of levels. The need to have others meet some of these emotional, social, intellectual needs lessen. And that helps us to release any expectations or having someone bear a level of trust that they no longer can, or that we can finally start to support for ourselves. And as a result, this will free up the relationships in our life. We'll meet them where they are, grow our compassion and love for them, and will give us a way to grow our capacity to include them in our circle of love, because the expectations, the level of trust is back where it belongs. Or maybe they just go back into the circle of love and compassion where all sentient beings, we hope, will abide one day. As we gain in wisdom, the circle grows even larger to encompass more and more beings. It becomes a great trust circle that anybody will become an object of our equal care and concern, including these friends who have had levels of trust in our life that have changed a lot. So I've been thinking about this, and I aspire to have a vast circle of trust for not only my friends, my community, but for all living beings without exception.